Hey everyone, and welcome to the Balanced Bodies Blueprint. I am your host, Vinny Russo.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Erin Stansfield.
And we're shifting gears from all the conventional fitness narrative you hear on most fitness podcasts, as our main emphasis lies in preventative healthcare, adopting a holistic approach to nutrition, and challenging the traditional views on various fitness topics.
Our mission with this podcast is to provide you with the information you need to achieve optimal health.
And on today's podcast, I have a very special guest. Her name is Brooke Rosenfeld. And what we're going to do today, we are going to cut through this nonsense and we're going to actually get real about why so many people get stuck in this cycle of failure when it comes to dieting and even their overall health. And Brooke, she has a lot of experience here, ton of experience. She'll go over that in a second. But I'm excited to get this information out to you guys because it's only going to add more value to your life. And that's what we do here on the Balanced Bodies Blueprint. So, Brooke, thanks again for joining. And I just want you to, take a few minutes, kind of go over your background and just introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, and thank you, Vinny, for having me on. I'm excited to be here. So my name is Brooke. I have been a registered dietitian since 2011, which seems like a very long time ago. I have my own private practice where I primarily focus on weight loss with people, but I've also been working in nursing homes and hospitals as well, throughout my career. And I just really find it very rewarding, to have been able to work with such a diverse range of ages. And I think that it's really helped me when working with people that are near the end of their life. I think it's really helped me coach people who are, like maybe in their 30s and even 20s and their 40s, and they don't realize just how important it is to take care of themselves starting young. I don't think people realize the impact that it has, and the detrimental effects of poor lifestyle, that it just compounds over time. So it's been, again, very rewarding for me. I love the elderly. I think they're adorable, but also I think that it's been, again, very helpful for me, as far as coaching people in their younger years as well.
Yeah, I love that because you bring an experience of like, hey, look, this is what I'm dealing with. This is who I'm helping. And this is what I see going on. Like, if you don't want to get to these issues, you got to start now and you got to stay consistent with it through this lifetime, right? You got to make this a lifestyle. So you've definitely seen firsthand, what decades of poor choices actually do to people. But before we actually dive into the bulk of the podcast, if you can, off the top of your head, what's the most eye-opening thing that you've witnessed that made you say, people need to hear this? Like when you're working with the elderly, what's the most eye-opening thing that you said that you're like, I need these younger people to hear this like now?
Well, I guess what I will say is, one of the conversations that I've had with people, like, more times than I can count at this point, when they are older, much older, is they wish that they had started sooner.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think something that people have too, like I've seen a lot of people who have limbs amputated, who are dependent on dialysis, who have heart failure and diabetes. And I think that a lot of times people get to what I call like an oh shit moment. I hope I can curse on here.
You can, of course. You'll hear it coming out of me all the time. So
okay, perfect,
yeah,
because I curse a lot. But that's when, they've gotten to a point where it's like, oh shit, like I'm getting my foot cut off.
Yeah.
Due to poor choices and what have you, and I think that people really do kind of take their health for granted. And then when they're put in that situation where they're like, hey, like their doctor's like, hey, you need to change or you're kind of fucked. Like, I think people are like, oh, okay. And then it's like, and then they panic. And I've had a lot of people come to me with, like end stage kidney disease and, whatever, and they're like, I need to make these changes. I don't want to go on dialysis. Please help me, just as an example.
Mm-hmm.
And they're panicked and they're freaking out, and I think if people can just understand, like, it's so important to not take your health for granted because it could so easily be taken away from you.
Yeah.
And it's never too late to start doing something, so
Yeah.
that's what I would say. And I hope I just answered your question. I go
No,
off on.
you definitely did. And you made something that's very close to me kind of pop up, which is like my father, he has some health issues. And he's been here and there with taking care of himself and not taking care of himself. And it's just been recent. Like he's 75 years old. He still works. He works every night. He has a bread route which he has to be truck drive for. So at 75, he works every single
Wow.
night. Like there's no day off, anything like that, because obviously the delis he goes to, the grocery stores he goes to, they need their bread.
Yeah.
So he's doing that, but it only took until like the last couple years where like he works out 4 days a week now. He goes for walks every single day, no matter how cold it
Awesome.
is. Yeah, it's almost like something flipped in him where he's like, you know what? I kind of want to hang around here for a couple more years. Like, I don't want to go in 2 years. I want to try to drag it out to 10 more years. I want to make that 85 and not be at 77 when I'm, going into the ground. And it
Yeah.
was like an oh shit moment. It was like, I really want to start taking care of it. Now it's like, because we would always have conversations, like I'm the nutrition guy, right? So like he would sort of like ask me questions here and there, but now he's like doing research on stuff. And he's like, well, I read this. And like, it's actually like an in-depth conversation now where we have this little back and forth. I will say though, he gets caught up in some of like the Barbara O'Neill shit, or like he'll hear something that maybe like Gary Brecka said, and he's like, "Well, what do you think about this?" And he might like start believing it until I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, take a step back. Let me explain why this is just nonsense." But it's cool because like now, like that flip switched in him, and he's taking care of himself. He's like, I wanna live longer." And it was
Yeah.
that oh shit moment, right? It was an oh shit moment that came up, and he said, "I got to make a change."
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah. I
that's a
mean,
great message.
it is. And like when I'm having conversations with my clients who are like, oh, like I'm not motivated, like blah, blah, blah. And I mean, you probably hear that all the time,
Hmm.
with the people that you work with. And I'm like, listen, like I always bring up, you have to understand, like, do you want to be there for your grandkids? Do you want to be able to travel and do things that you enjoy? Do you want to be able to shower, to feed yourself, to get out of fucking bed, to not
Yeah.
be wheelchair and bed bound? Like, do you know how sad it is to see someone sitting in their wheelchair just wanting to go outside and get some sunlight, but no one will take them? But
Yeah.
they're dependent on someone to do like these little simple things that we all take for granted.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that people really need to like, and I have this conversation with them and they're like, oh yeah, like, do you want your children to be dependent on you? Or sorry, do you want to be dependent on your
And your
children
children. Yeah.
rather,
Yeah. Yeah.
and be a burden on them?
Yeah.
My mom says that all the time to me. She's like, I don't want you to have to take care of me as I get older. And my mom is probably one of the most fit people I know.
Hmm.
She walks every day. She eats like so well and, always has emphasized protein, like
Yep.
way
Good for
back.
her. Yeah. Good
Yeah.
for
Oh,
her.
she
A
she
step
and
ahead
I
of the
like
game.
share
Yeah.
clothes. Like she is like
That's awesome.
very, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Like she's really been my inspiration, um, big time. And she's such a great example. And she has set such a great example. And I think that people need to keep that in mind as well. Like your kids are watching you.
Hmm.
I watched her. I saw her waking up very early in the morning when I was little, and she'd be walking on the treadmill while I was sleeping, but I
Yeah.
saw her,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that impacted me significantly. I saw her lifting weights. I saw her doing her little exercise videos, with the spandex
Hmm.
women and everything. And it was, but I remember all of this. She would make vegetables all the time and like she'd sneak them in our pancakes and shit and like
Yeah. Yeah.
my brother and I fruit and vegetables all the time, I mean, so and I don't understand people who don't like vegetables, but I think it's so important to introduce that to children when they're young, but that's
Yep.
another conversation. We have to eat vegetables,
Yeah. Of course.
and fruit. But anyway, so
Yeah. No, I think you bring up a couple good points there, setting an example. And with me about to have my first kid, with
Yes.
my daughter on the way, like it's something I definitely want her to see and instill and have that as a value her health moving forward in life. And it's crazy because like you're saying this stuff and it's kind of like you can probably see it in your mind's eye, like exactly what it looked like when you would look at your mom on the treadmill at that age. Like it was so long ago, but it was like burned into your
I
memory.
remember. I
Yeah.
can actually see it now. And what she would do is she would put on movies with like subtitles and it
Hmm.
would be quiet, but she'd be like reading the subtitles
Yeah,
while
yeah,
she was
yeah.
walking on the treadmill. But she got it done. And hey, she'd walk around the house sometimes.
Yeah.
And I tell my clients to do that if they don't have a walking pad. I'm like, if you don't have a treadmill or a walking pad, walk around your fucking house.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I don't want to. It's
Yeah.
boring. I'm like, throw on a podcast, listen to some good music,
Yeah.
get it done.
Yeah. I remember during COVID, I was the executor of my grandparents' estate and they both happened to pass away during that time period. So I was
Yeah.
staying there and trying to get everything together and they didn't have a treadmill or anything like that. But I was in like competition prep. So I'm like, I need to get my cardio in. How am
Oh
I going to
yeah.
do this? But they had a ton of stairs. So I would like hold a weight on my shoulders and I would just go walk up and down the steps because it's all I had. But you make it work, right? You find some way to do it. Yeah, and it was cool though, but I digress. I digress. Let's get into this podcast now. On your social media, you have some very, very good content. I think
Thank
your
you.
stories are something that should really resonate with people who follow you because it's just so personal. You're one-on-one. You have the camera just like right in front of your face and you're just talking and you're just being natural and you give out so much good information. And a lot of the stuff that you talk about is how to try to avoid like this whole weight regain stuff, right? So I know you work with a lot of people who've lost weight and then regained that same weight over and over again. So what do you think is the biggest reason for this type of vicious cycle?
Okay, so well, I think there's a lot here, but all of the people that come to work with me have done every diet under the sun. Any diet with a name, Vinny, they've done it.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is yeah, okay, maybe you'll lose some weight for sure, but then they stop and they inevitably go back to whatever they were doing before. Their lifestyle hasn't changed. They have no idea about calories, about how to build balanced plates,
Mhm.
whatever, you know what I mean? And there's generally no emphasis on protein, fiber. Um, they don't know. So then when they get to wherever they're going, they're like, okay, well, how do I go out to eat now? How do I travel? How do I do anything? Because they just don't know because they were following rules that aren't really real world applicable. And I always like am putting in my posts like, learn skills and tools over rules.
Yeah, yeah, I love that.
And that's why I love when people are open to tracking their food. And I will say that I have people that are reluctant to do it at first.
Hmm.
And then, like, for one of my newer clients, he was like, I'm not doing that. That's a pain in the ass. And I'm like, okay, let's do like some sort of portion control, whatever.
Yeah.
And we did that. It was bullshit. Like he wasn't getting results. And he's like,
Hmm.
fine, I'll do it. And I was like, good.
Yeah.
So then, sure enough, his weight has been trending down pretty consistently. And he's like, it's working. And I'm like, yes, it is
Yeah.
because it fucking works.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, and I understand, like, yes, it takes some time, but it really is not that big of a fucking deal, especially if you plan out your meals ahead of time, especially if you keep them
Hmm.
simple and you don't try to make these elaborate
Oh
recipes.
yeah. That's the worst. But yeah.
Repeat your
Yeah.
fucking meals.
Hmm.
Like it's and he eats very simply, so it was perfect.
It's got
And
to be
he
easy then. Yep.
And something I bring up a lot too is most people have zero nutrition education. And I joke about it in my posts. I talk about how the most nutrition education I got up through high school was taught by a guy. And I don't know if you know the cartoon Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know Carl? Well,
Yeah, it's vague, but I definitely watched that before, so I definitely know that. Yeah.
yeah, I like adult cartoons. But anyway, so if you look up Carl, that's who taught me about nutrition in school.
Okay. That's
And
funny.
he, it's funny, but like also not funny. It was my gym teacher, okay? And we had like one class where he read out of a textbook, and it was
Yeah.
pathetic in our health class. But that's what most people get in school.
Yeah.
So to learn about nutrition, you have to actively go out and learn about it. Like I had to study it in school,
Yeah.
So when people are open to tracking, I'm like, okay, good. Like you're actually going to be getting an education around your food choices and learn how to build balanced meals. And you know, you got to put some time and effort in order to get where you want to go and really and truly educate yourself, and then eventually hopefully be able to kind of wean yourself off of it. And some people like it and want to keep doing it.
Yeah.
I
That's me.
actually like tracking my food.
That's me. Yeah,
Yeah.
same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just
So
organized. So as long as I like organization and structure, so yeah, that resonates with me. But you know what? It's true though. Like it is very tedious in the beginning. With anything that you're learning new, there's going to be those growing pains, right? Like
right.
you have to get over that though. Like because it's so well worth it. And the simple fact that you start to build this food awareness, right? Because you're tracking, you're like, oh, well,
Right.
I didn't know this had this much protein and this much fat in it. I didn't know that. Like I didn't know
Yeah.
how much fat were in whole eggs. I thought it was all protein because eggs are protein. No, well, you could see and you start to realize it and you start to educate yourself around it. And then it becomes to the point where like you get so good at it and you know what's coming in. It's sort of like you could start getting away from the whole weighing out and tracking because now you're keeping track in your head because you kind of know what's going on. So yeah, I think that's great. But
Yes.
you mentioned something that you do mention a lot, and it's the rules instead of, or people rely on rules instead of tools. And you said you need the tools, not the rules. So what's the difference, and why is that mindset so destructive, for lack of a better term?
So why it's so destructive is so a couple of people that came to work with me recently, they were afraid to eat fruit. And,
The
well,
sugar,
because,
the
oh, the
sugar.
sugar, too high
Yeah,
in sugar. And
yeah,
I was like, listen, I was like, I don't care whatever program you were on before, because I
mhm,
guess one person in particular that I'm thinking of, she was limited to, I think, like one serving of fruit a day. I don't know what program this was. I don't know what the stupid ass logic was,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I was like, this is no. What I do with people is I give them, a caloric range. I give them a higher protein goal and a fiber. I encourage a higher fiber goal.
yeah. Of course.
So it's not as restrictive, and for I have, Gen Pop clients, they're
Hmm.
not competing, they're not, they just want to improve their health and, feel more full and
Yep.
just lose weight more efficiently and effectively. But when you're following rules, there is such a thing as an on or off switch with these diets. You're following it and you're on, or you, oh my God, I ate 2 servings of fruit. I fucked up. I ruined everything, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So it's like that black or white, all or nothing, on or off mentality. And that's where these fad diets are like, I mean, they're dumb for a lot of reasons, but they're not actually teaching you anything. Like,
Yeah.
how do I, what, and I don't know. I have mixed feelings about Weight Watchers. I don't understand. I know they change things all the time, but I know that I have a lot of people that come from them. They're like points and, tracking calories are not the same.
Yeah.
So they're like, when I go out to eat, it's like it doesn't make sense. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? So
Yeah, with Weight Watch, I mean, listen, it works for millions of people, right?
yeah,
It helps, but you also got to understand, like these people that try that never tried anything.
yes,
So initially, when you start to like control, it's a form of portion control, but very, very loosely, right? And they add like the points get changed based off of what I would say is going to be like more. You could call it if it's better for you, there's less points. If it's worse for you, there's more points. And they kind of have a good structure with that. But yeah, if you're looking to actually like take your physique to somewhere else or take your overall health to that next level, it's got to go way beyond Weight Watchers. It really does. But it is a good start for people, and it
Sure.
has helped people over time. You did mention the stuff like with fruit, and that grinds my gears. It really does. 'Cause
Well,
it's
I'm
like,
sure we could go. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
yeah, no,
I
listen,
was just
because
gonna
we could
say,
go on for days with
I
this.
know about wonderful things that we see on social media
Yeah.
or whatever, but yeah, fruit is good for you. And I think something for me is I, of course, I want people to eat mostly like minimally processed whole foods, but I
Hmm.
don't want people to be afraid of eating things that are fun. I like to call them fun.
Yeah.
I don't call things good or bad, and I don't want my clients referring like, "Oh, I was bad." And I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
I'm like, "You had fucking ice cream. Like,
Yeah.
you're not bad. I eat
Yeah.
ice cream a lot."
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think it's a lot of working away from their past, the downward spiral thoughts that they have where, they beat themselves up, they speak terribly about themselves. And I try and like actively combat them. And it's so rewarding when I see like the evolution of when they started with me to, the present. And I'm like, oh wow, like your relationship with food has changed tremendously.
Yeah.
And that to me is more rewarding than almost anything. Yes, I love the physical transformation, and ultimately that's what they started out wanting, but you
Hmm.
have to kind of fix your mindset and your approach to this whole thing. Instead of like, jumping from yo-yo fad diet to fad diet and not actually learning anything and not changing your lifestyle.
Yeah, and it might sound a little like to our listeners, it might sound a little bit woo-woo-ish, right? To just be like, oh, you got to have that positive mindset, you got to build a better relationship with food, and it's something that takes time to actually
Yes.
do, but it like the ROI on that is insane. It really is, and you're not going to initially feel it or notice it, but over time, like it hits you, and you're just like you have this relationship with food that you have where you're no longer having this dichotomous view of good versus bad, right? Like white versus black. No, it's that there's a blend there, and if something might like there's a spectrum, and some might be towards the left end of the spectrum, some might be towards the right end of the spectrum. There's no food that's inherently good or bad for you, right?
Nope.
So it's how you use it and how often you have those. So Brooke makes a great point with it's really just striking balance here is really what it is. But you did mention some things about like this mindset and how that affects people. So do you see a pattern where people might have a quote unquote diet trauma where you have these past failures make it harder for them to actually get to trying a diet again or trying to live a healthier lifestyle because they failed?
I think, yes, I think that people get really discouraged at times because, it's like I've lost and regained the same amount of weight so many times. You know what I mean? And that is a very common thing that I hear. But I think that once they're able to stick with it for long enough and they don't try and change so many things at once, because I think people can get overwhelmed in
Oh
that
yeah.
way. Like I'm always, if someone's like, I'm gonna go to the gym every single day, I'm like, okay, but you like don't go at all now.
Yeah.
So we might want to backpedal a little bit and be more realistic. And let's say maybe it's like maybe 2 times a week to start. And if you could do more, great. But do you know what I mean? It's like if you say you're gonna go every day and then you don't, you're kind of, I'm sure you've heard this, like keeping promises you make to yourself.
Yeah.
And,
It's the integrity. Yeah. Yeah.
so, if you are setting yourself up to fail from the get, then,
Good
you
luck,
know,
right? Yeah.
right? Like, so you have to set yourself up to succeed, build that confidence in yourself, and then you could always like add on more to your plate at that point. When you're like, yeah, like on a scale out of 10, I'm like 10 out of 10, like I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and once again, another great point that you put out there. But off of that, just really quickly, because I don't want to lose my train of thought here. Give me one, if you can give me one, because we're talking about like a little bit of diet trauma, some failures, trying these fad diets. What is one small, stupid thing that you see people obsess over that actually holds them back? Just one.
One,
If you had to choose one, what would it be? Because
so this
I
is,
know you could say a bunch, but just give me one.
oh man. So I think that I have this conversation very often as well. And it's like fresh in my mind because I was literally just talking to someone about this today. People get very hung up on like their little like wearable devices and how many calories they're burning.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, like it's so much easier to eat 500 calories worth of cookies than it is to burn 500 calories. So, like,
Yeah.
they'll take, I'm doing so much exercise and nothing's happening and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I think that people kind of like think they're a lot more active than they are. And I'm like, hey, like, what's your step count like? And are you sitting most of the day outside of like the hour that you're spending in the gym? Generally, yes. That's the case for a lot of people, unfortunately. Like we're stuck to a desk a lot, right? Um, but I think that, yeah, that's something I would say. And I could name other things, but that's one thing that comes to mind is kind of thinking you're a lot more active than you are. And I think that, when it comes to weight loss, I think that people really need to understand the nutrition part is so like important. And I think that people don't realize that.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that believe that they could outwork a bad diet when you can't. Let's be completely honest with everybody. You can't do that. If you're going to make the most efficient changes, it's going to be with diet first before anything else. And plus, those wearables, they don't give an accurate representation of how many calories you burn. I used to be a part-time personal trainer for Orange Theory Fitness, and they listen. It's a great concept. It is, but they have like the calories of how many people, like what people are burning, and like these people are hitting over 1,000 calories burned, and I'm just like, with what we did, you're at like maybe 250, maybe 300 max
Yeah.
for the amount of stuff you did. And then you have those that are like, oh, well, I had leg day, so I could eat whatever I want after. I'm like, how many sets did you even bring to failure with leg day? I guarantee you didn't fall with like on the squat rack. Like I guarantee it. Like there's this idea that like if you work out a little bit harder or a little bit longer, you could eat whatever and get away with it when it's not true. It's not true at all.
No.
And I wish that that was out there more often because we do have these higher carb days for leg day, which makes sense because you're working out a bigger muscle group. But if your intensity isn't where it's supposed to be, it's like there's no point. You might not even need to refuel afterwards because you probably didn't go through all the glycogen, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
exactly. And I think that people kind of get really hung up on like all these things that they should do, but meanwhile, like they're not walking enough, they're not sleeping well, they're stressed as fuck, they're not like doing things to help manage their stress.
it's
Like
not sexy enough. Sleep,
right,
really?
right.
It's not sexy
Yeah.
enough.
I
Yeah,
know. It's like, oh wow, that's so boring. It's like, yeah, but that's like what works. Like they're not drinking enough water. Like,
yeah.
I always keep this like next to me like all
Mm.
day so I can drink more water because I'm terrible at it, especially this time of year. But yeah, it's the unsexy stuff done constantly, consistently over time that brings us results. That's
Yeah.
that's what we got to do.
100.
Not
Listen,
the
I'm
Gary Brecka stuff.
yeah, I'm bite sizing that. That's going to be one of the posts for this podcast episode. What you just said, that was great. Yeah,
Thank you.
raise the roof. Let's transition into longer term consequences based on poor lifestyle choices. So, what you mentioned earlier is that you do see the consequences of poor health daily because you are with the elderly, and it's kind of like an accumulation of poor habits leading to this end result over time. Um, and I don't think many people actually think about it. But I remember you saying something on your social media. I think it was on your social media. I don't know if it was on your social media or it was to me directly. But you were like, one day they might not even be able to wipe their own asses, like if you keep doing that. So, what are some of the worst preventable situations you've seen that could have been avoided with better health habits? If you could just give a few examples, because somebody might be doing this right now and it might hit them and actually change the way they're living their life.
Yeah, so I think that things that you can do right now that are, I think, going to have just a tremendous impact, like as you age,
Hmm.
lifting weights, being able to like pick up a bag, like your bags of groceries and shit like that. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like we need to be able to lift weights to keep our bones strong. I mean, let me tell you something. If you fall when you're older and you're not strong and you haven't like, made sure that you're eating enough protein consistently, like an injury like that, and you haven't been resistance training and whatever, that's like the beginning of the end.
Yep.
You know what I
100%.
mean? Like
Yep.
it, and quite a few of my family members, they were quite old. Like I'm just thinking of my Aunt Ida in particular. She was like in her 90s and she fell, broke her hip, downhill from there, passed away. I mean, these are, the types of things that people don't realize how important it is to like, to strength train and to keep your bones strong and reduce risk of injury. And if your diet is mostly like highly processed foods, like you're definitely not going to be getting adequate nutrition. You're not going to feel full. You're likely going to be consuming a lot more calories than you realize because, I mean, let's face it, that stuff is so easy to eat, like overeat rather.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it's not very like voluminous. Like, and us coaches are always talking about eat higher volume, like, fruits, vegetables, lean proteins. But if you think about like a plate with like, like a nice grilled chicken breast and vegetables and like a sweet potato, it's like, like it's
There's a ton of
nice,
food on that
full.
plate. Yeah.
Right. And then you look at like a McDonald's cheeseburger, which like for me to feel full, I'd probably need like four of those.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, and their fries and whatever, like it doesn't take up a lot of space, but
Hmm.
it's so calorie packed. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I think I went off on a tangent. I'm sorry. But
No.
essentially what I'm saying is, if you are over time just gaining weight and gaining weight and gaining weight, one day it's gonna be like, oh my God, I can't walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I think that people don't just realize like over time, yeah, like you're, gaining like maybe a couple pounds here, a couple pounds there, but then it's like, oh my God. Do
Yep.
you know what I mean? And it kind of like creeps up on us.
Yeah, so
Um,
so basically what you're saying is like make sure that you're resistance trained so you can get your ass around and move around and you want to have that bone density, that muscle mass to be able to
right,
carry yourself, right? And then obviously look after your nutrition because it'll sneak up on you. And if you get to a point of no return because of you're not really even paying attention of what you're doing, it's just gonna exacerbate the lack of quality of life that you're gonna have later on in life.
right. And
Yeah.
increased risk of developing chronic disease. And we don't want that. We want you to stay healthy.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the ways that you were saying to do that, because it really does come down to calories in versus calories out. No matter how many people want to say that it doesn't, that is the foundation. And if you're like, hey, we need to fill up your plate with more voluminous foods, which is a lot more on the plate for less calories, so you feel fuller. So we're not
Yes.
taking in those calories, so you're not slowly gaining weight over time. I think that's a great idea to do. And it's something very simple that people could apply like right now. Like when you say, well, let me look at how many calories does X amount of broccoli give me compared to how many calories, it's the same calories, how many chips do I have to eat? Well, there's a ton more food you could have with broccoli. It's almost like it gets rid of that eat less, move more. You're not really eating less in terms of volume, you're just eating less calories because you're
Right.
making the cognizant and mindful decision to focus on the nutrient dense, lower calorie, high volume foods. So yeah, I think that's a great tip for people to actually start to that they could apply right now to start to avoid any of those detrimental effects that happen downstream when they're not paying attention to what they're actually doing. So let me ask you this question because I have a hard time, figuring out. But why do you think people always assume that they can fix it later when it comes to their health?
I think a lot of people, and I'm not saying that this is like everybody that does this, but I think that people tend to think, well, I could just take like a medication. Well,
Mm,
I could just take a medication.
that's a good perspective. Yeah.
I have some people who are on over 20, 30 medications a day.
Yeah.
They all have side effects, by the way.
Yep.
I don't understand. I feel like they probably need medications for the side effects of their medications.
Mhm.
But you taking a pill, like you can't always just take a pill. Um, and that's just you don't want that. There
Yeah.
are so many things that you can do that are going to help in prevention rather than having to react after the fact. And yeah, I know that a lot of people struggle as far as cravings are concerned, for example. And they might feel like, they just, no matter what, they're like, it's like they have like a bottomless pit for a stomach.
Yeah.
But then with like deeper inspection, when I look at what people are eating, because I always do that before I assign targets or anything, they're eating like probably half the amount of protein that they should be every day. And forget fiber. That's something that I think like it's I have some people that are eating maybe like less than 5 grams a day when they
Wow.
first, yeah.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so, that's something that I really stress and emphasize with people. I'm like, you're not eating enough during the day. And then that will lead to you, of course, being hungry later. And I always keep Kirby on my desk because that's what people turn into. Am I aging myself here?
Yeah.
Um, but that's what happens to people at night. They like go and they start inhaling stuff in their cabinets and, they
Yeah.
feel like they can't control themselves around sweets and things like that. Um, but, if you focus on just if you don't eat vegetables right now, just try and add like a fist-sized portion to like at least one meal a day, and that's a step in the right direction. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Try and have some color on your plates. Like get the like nutrients from the vegetables and the fruits. Like it's so important.
Yeah.
And I can almost guarantee you if you increase the amount of protein that you're eating, you're going to feel so much more full and satisfied as well.
I 100% agree with that as well. Normally, when I get clients that are coming on board and they're like, I just at nighttime I ravage, and I'm like, well, what do you eat during the day? Well, I wake up, I have a cup of coffee, I go to work, I don't really eat until lunch, then I'll just have like a salad, and then when dinner comes around, I'll make sure that I'm mindful and I have my chicken and maybe some more vegetables, maybe a little rice, and I'm like, yeah, you're eating nothing during the day, so your
Like a
body's like.
bird.
Yeah, your body's like, yo, fucking feed me, please.
I
Like,
know.
so then you go ravaging. So it's like kind of flip that around. Start eating heavy in the morning, heavy in the afternoon, nice big dinner, and you won't snack at night because your body's like, I'm good. I don't need it anymore, right? And
Exactly.
protein is so important with that because it's the most satiating food we could put to our body, that and fiber. And if you haven't noticed this yet, Brooke keeps talking about protein and fiber because it's going to make you feel full. And if you are feeling full, you will not binge, you will not snack on shit that you feel like you shouldn't have to, and you will not over consume your calories. So please take this advice. Fiber and protein. I love it.
Yes, yes.
I love it.
And those are like the two things that I focus on with my clients, I think most of all. Yes, of course the calories are important too, but the protein and fiber are typically they're very lacking.
Yeah.
So,
I think those two alone will help control the calories just because of that satiation factor. So it's
yes.
like yeah, we understand calories is everything, but let's really start with some easy stuff. Eat a little bit more protein, focus on more vegetables. Then we'll think about the calories later, but it's kind of taking care of the calories because
Yes.
yeah, the vegetables are voluminous with low calorie and it's filling you up. So you're not going to eat as much. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that people need to kind of just like relax on the snacks. I mean, it's like, oh, like what snack should I have? What snack should I have? I'm like, if you're eating meals that actually fill you up, you may feel like you don't need to snack.
Yeah, yeah, I love that because it's the truth. Like she's just speaking the truth here, everybody.
Speaking the truth.
But listen, we're giving a lot of like tips right now, so let's organize it real quick. So what are like the top three daily habits people should implement now to set themselves up for long-term health?
Well, I would say make sure that you're getting adequate sleep and try to get to bed at a decent hour. And I know that for like parents of little babies, that might be hard. but as much as you can, make sure that you're getting adequate sleep. I tell people to like try and even set a bedtime timer on your phone because, of course, like the lack of sleep can just screw us up in so many ways, increase our cravings, just feel like
Hmm.
shit overall. So I think sleep is really important. I think that just moving more and finding movement that you enjoy and that you can do consistently. For me, that's walking. I
Hmm.
literally am known as the lady that walks everywhere in my town. People stop me all the time. I
Crazy
see
walking
you.
lady.
I am.
Yeah.
I am my town's crazy walking lady, me and my
Yeah.
dog, who's actually right behind me. But yeah, just, find movement that you like, even if it's walking. Like I just do that consistently, do it daily, move your body daily.
Yeah.
Um, and then as far as like, I think obviously food should be mentioned. I would try and make sure that you're having something that's a good high quality source of protein at every meal if you can. And I always
Mhm.
tell people like if you're not tracking your food, aiming for like a hand size portion, like that's a pretty good amount of protein. That's what I
Mhm.
tell people, at least that. Um, so like, lean meats, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, like tofu,
Mhm.
like aim for something like that with your meals. And I think that you'll feel a lot more full and just like, it'll help stabilize your blood sugar levels, your energy levels. You'll just feel better overall. So I hope you think those are three good tips there.
No, they definitely are. Sleep is widely overlooked, I think, in all aspects of fitness and health. I think it's just overlooked, and it's just like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I'll sleep when I'm dead. It's like, no, you're gonna die early if you don't sleep. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like no. Focus on your sleep because it's not like a sudden impact, right? There's a downstream effect. It's like if you get shitty quality sleep, then your hunger cues get fucked up, or then you don't have the energy to go on your walks. You're too tired, or your performance in the gym starts slacking, right?
Yeah.
So it has all these downstream effects that I think are widely overlooked because it's not like so impactful. Um, I think what you said about the protein with, hey, here's my hand, like use that as a guide because you always care, unless you lose your hands, you always got it on you,
I
right? And you
hope
could,
you always have your hand with
yes,
you.
yes, yes. We want we want to make that known. But it's like, and it goes with the body type. Like bigger individuals are gonna have bigger hands. They
Yes.
require more protein, right? Smaller people, smaller hands, they require less protein. So I
Right.
think, yeah, I definitely think those habits um, all speak towards living a longer, healthier life. And I think the sleep one was a good one because everyone overlooks that.
Oh yeah.
You mentioned earlier about well, we mentioned earlier about people basically labeling food as good and bad. So how would you go about like telling people or coaching them on how to get away from that dichotomous view? Like how do you teach them to see that? Because it's very important because like we said earlier, if you have that better relationship with food, it's going to have a huge ROI. So how do you get them to start unlearning that?
So I think, well, it's definitely person dependent, but for example, there are some people that just have a sweet tooth,
Hmm.
and I am one of those people. I do not understand people who only like salty stuff. I'm like, no, I need something sweet like
Yeah.
every day. Like, no, no. So if that's the case, I have people that will avoid eating sweets that they like,
Hmm.
whether it be chocolate or whatever. So what I do is I tell them, why don't we try carving out some calories every day
Hmm.
just for that? And we portion it in. And that could be maybe 100-calorie Chips Ahoy pack or, pre-portioned out chocolate,
Yep.
bite like mini size, kid size.
Hmm.
Whatever the case may be. Maybe it's a pre-portioned out ice cream and
Those Kit Kat
they,
minis, they get me.
oh,
I love them so much.
yeah, I'm a
Only can have
big
one in
this.
the house, right?
Oh my God. For me, like I'm a big this time of year, usually it's ice cream, but in the colder months, I really like chocolate.
Yeah.
So I always have some chocolate every day. But they see like, wow, I'm eating this every day and my weight is overall trending down
Yep.
and I'm okay, like nothing bad. I didn't turn into a pumpkin. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
100%. I
and
love
I
this.
think that you're kind of just it's, I don't know what the word would be, but it's like the more you do something, it kind of just doesn't have the same like ooh anymore. Because it's like, oh wow, like I know that I can have this. So it's like, who fucking cares?
Yeah.
And then I've had people be like, I have had, so this one woman comes to mind. She was having issues with binge eating. Like at night, she would, raid her cabinets, right? And she's like, my snacks that I would gravitate towards are stale because I haven't wanted them.
Hmm.
And that's insane to go from not feeling like you can control yourself around these foods to forgetting that you had them.
Yeah, that's great.
It's awesome. Like,
Yeah.
and things like that, I don't think people realize like how big of a deal that actually is. Like those things are like, holy shit, like that's
Mhm.
so awesome. And I always like freak out over stuff like that with my clients. And I'm very like animated if you can't tell. So I'll like be like, ah! Like,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but it's like, it's a really big deal. And I think that they need to give themselves more credit. And I celebrate like everything with them because
Mhm.
these are big milestones to like celebrate. Like, oh my God, snacks that you used to just like, e- eat all of them, crumbs like just left, whatever. Now they're stale in your cabinet and they're gross. But
Yeah.
you didn't even care that they were there.
Yeah, I think you as a coach, you need to actually bring that up because it makes them realize, like, holy shit, you're right. Like this should be a huge win because maybe they don't even realize it, and that happens a lot, honestly, with clients with certain, what do we call progress measures, right? They don't even
Yeah.
realize some of them. They're just focused on like maybe it's just a scale or maybe it's just their photos, but you throw these other things out that they don't even realize, and it's like, holy shit, you're right. Like I'm a totally different person. I have a totally different mindset. But I
Yeah.
love what you said because what you're using is like a form of like exposure therapy. You're like, look, let's take what you want. We're going to have it. How are we going to fit it in? We're going to take a little bit out of here, a little bit out of here. So you have the calories, then the macros still match or whatever. Like you're doing all that for them. And I'm going to just show you that you'll be able to eat this and still get the results that you want. And as
Yeah.
they do it over time and they're like, oh my God, I'm not turning into Kirby or I'm not turning into, my rolls are kind of going away. My waist is shrinking and I'm still having these foods. It's a bit of like exposure therapy and it's slow, right? But you have to go a little bit slow for them over time. And then they realize it. And it's like, oh man. And that slowly shifts their perspective of, got to avoid these foods always because they're going to make me fat to, I can have them. I just got to understand how to fit it in and I'll be fine and it's okay.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think too, when you start to add in like such a, large amount of protein. And when I say that, it's not like abnormally large. I don't give people like insane protein targets, but compared to what they were eating before, it's probably like double. So that's like a big deal for them, right? And they're eating more fiber. So they're, again, like this helps control their cravings significantly. And they just don't have those same cravings anymore. They don't have the same tendencies anymore. Um, and yeah, it's awesome. So it's like you're focusing on like enhancing versus restricting.
Hmm. Yeah. It's great. That's a good perspective. It's a good flip, and I think people need to take note of that because it's how you look at the situation here. Um, but you're going to have some people. So for the people who are listening who actually know that they need to make a change, right? But they keep making these excuses for why they're not changing. And listen, we've all encountered them. What's your no BS advice for those people?
Don't take your health for granted because it could so easily be taken from you. Um, and I think that we need to realize how like fortunate we are to be able to take care of ourselves and to be able to do all the little things that you definitely take for granted. I mean, we all do, right?
Hmm.
Like you don't want to lose your independence. You want to be able to, and I know I said this earlier, but I think it's important to reiterate, like take care of yourself now, take this shit seriously because one day, and I hope it doesn't happen, but what does Mike Tyson say? Like, you get punched in the face and like everything kind
Everybody has a
of
plan A,
right. Thank you.
yeah, until they get
Right.
punched in the
Thank
face.
you.
Yeah.
Whatever. If you know what exactly what I was saying. But
Yeah.
I mean, but it's true because like one day, like you're just like, oh my God. And don't let that happen. Um, And I know that there are so many people that I hear this so often. I wish I had started sooner. Don't take this for granted.
Mm,
And remember that you can start where you're at. You can make small changes, even if you made one change, even if tomorrow, like let's say you don't exercise. What if you walked for 10 minutes tomorrow?
mhm.
That, or even today, whenever you're listening to this podcast, like you can do that right now and you can start moving in a better direction.
So what can you do to get them to see that you don't want to look down the road and have your health be an inconvenience? So what is like that one thing that I don't know how to word this. I don't know because I said the word
No, because
privilege.
no, but it is like you are like, I mean, honestly, it's like a blessing to be able to do whatever it is that you're doing right now. And I think that what people don't realize is when you're younger, like if you're in your 20s, like first of all, when I can get injured from sleeping at 37 years old. Explain that to me. I don't know, but I mean, but seriously, like when you get older, like things hit differently. So
Yep.
when you're younger and like let's say you're like overweight when you're younger, but you don't feel bad in any way and you're functioning fine, like as you get older, and that's just one example that I'm thinking of, like it's probably going to be harder to walk and like go upstairs and it's going to start to hurt and you're going to start to, you know what I mean? So like
Mhm.
I think that people need to realize like when you're younger, things just don't you're not going to feel the impacts necessarily. So you're probably like, I'm fine. And then
Yeah.
as you get older, it's like, oh, maybe
Creeps up
not.
on you. Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think I don't know if that answered your question, but I think that people don't realize like all the impacts of what they're doing now when they're younger, if you're a younger person listening to
Mhm.
this, that it eventually will likely catch up with you.
Yeah. And I see like the main message and the theme behind this whole entire episode is like take care of your shit now. Like for real. Like don't just put it off. Like the procrastination, it's not going to help here. Like, yes, can you do it tomorrow? Maybe, but are you going to do it tomorrow? Are you going to say, I could do it again tomorrow? Or I could, and that's going to just keep being that persistent theme of I could always just do it on Monday, or I'll wait until after the holidays, or I'll wait till this. Start now. Like, even with what Brooke just said, like 10-minute walk. If you could do that today and you haven't done it yet, why not? Just go for a 10-minute walk. And to be honest with you, you're going to feel better. Like, I always say, like, I like doing cardio in the morning. It kind of gets me up and moving. It's not so much that like you're burning extra body fat. It's just it gets my day moving. And
Yeah.
it sucks in the morning. I don't want to fucking do it, but when I'm done, I'm like I feel so much better that I just got it done with and just did it. And that's the first step because then you start feeling good. Then you start feeling better about yourself. And then you make even better decisions because now you don't want those good decisions that you're making to be pushed behind. So you make even better decisions. Then your food starts to improve and it's all this little snowball effect. So
Yeah.
yes, I think you didn't. I don't think I asked the question correctly, but I think you answered it without me asking it. So
I think I
yeah,
did, but
yeah.
no, I think that it's really important to realize like all the little insignificant thing. I say they're insignificant, but they're not. All the little things that you do every day to show up for yourself, like you said, they snowball, they compound, and then in time, if you keep doing those things, you're going to see big results in, 6 months from now, a year from now. Like keep showing up and keeping the promises that you make to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's wrap this up with one little quick game where I kind of want you to say whether like I'm going to throw out some common health trends that we see today, and I just want you to say whether you believe they're overrated or underrated, and if you want to elaborate on why, that's great. If you're like, well, it's underrated, but here's why, or if you're just like, nah, it's fucking overrated. Next, like that's fine too. So whichever way you want to do it, but I'm gonna just throw
Sure,
some health trends at you, and I just want to hear your response. And if you want to elaborate on it, you can. All right.
sure.
All right. First health trend, keto.
Stupid. Like, I mean, listen, if you want to eat lower carb, that's fine, but you do not have to go keto by any means. It's essentially just another way of achieving a calorie deficit. So,
Overrated.
overrated, but
Overrated. Well, you said stupid. That's overrated, right?
right,
All
exactly.
right. So keto overrated. What about the 10K mark steps? So you have to reach 10K.
No, I think that people get overwhelmed. Okay, so sorry, overrated. Um, I think that you need to assess where you're at as far as like your steps are right now. And by the way, like if you have a smartphone, it's tracking your steps likely. So, you don't necessarily even have to have like a wearable device. Like if you keep your phone on you, you can get a pretty good gauge of where your steps are right now. If you're at like maybe 3,000 steps a day, why don't you try and get to four? And then if you're at four, why don't you get to five? Like
Mhm.
like that's an improvement from where you're at now. You don't necessarily have to just go from 2,000 steps a day to 10,000 steps a day. You know
Yeah,
what I
you'll be
mean?
way too overwhelmed with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Mhm.
Um, Protein powder.
I think that it's helpful for people who are having a hard time hitting their protein targets, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't know if I want to say overrated or underrated. I'd say depends on the person.
Okay, depends on the situation. I'll take that as an answer.
Okay.
What about meal timing?
I mean, I think that also is dependent on like again, I work with like general population people, so I basically just want them to eat consistent meals throughout the day. So I guess
Mhm.
I'll say overrated for my situation.
Yeah.
I do think that your body kind of likes to develop like a rhythm and a routine. So eating at fairly regular times, like it's not like I have to eat at 9, I have to eat at 12. Like it's not like that. But if you're eating around the same time every day, I think your body kind of tends to like know when the food is kind of
Hmm.
coming. And I think it feels really good for your body to be in a rhythm. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What about fasting?
Again, it's another way to be in a calorie deficit. There's no need to eat overrated. Sorry, I'm not good at this game.
The way you're explaining it, I'm pretty sure the audience can figure out whether you think it's overrated or underrated. All right, so you're saying fasting's overrated.
Yeah, I mean, if it helps you adhere to your deficit better, fine, but I never tell people they have to fast. I mean, you're just essentially cutting out breakfast, so you're eating less.
Yeah.
And maybe not even because sometimes people will overeat because they skipped meals. So it might not even be beneficial for you to make sure that you're hitting your deficit.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just a guest on another podcast and we talked about intermittent fasting and how they believe that like there's this 8 hour window that's so magical and special. I'm like, if you overeat in that 8 hour window, you're not gonna lose weight. You're
Right.
gonna if you go over your calories in that 8 hour window, you're going to be in a caloric surplus. You're not gonna lose weight. You're not gonna see what you call or what you think are the benefits. So I agree 100% with you there too. What about omega-3 fish oil supplements?
I think that most people probably aren't getting adequate omega 3s in their diet. So, I think that they can absolutely be beneficial for sure. I don't necessarily tell people like, hey, you need to take them, but it definitely can't hurt.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I would say if you see like their diet history and it's
Yeah.
not full of fatty fish or they don't barely ever eat it, I think it's a good supplement to throw into their plan to make sure they're getting some of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What about hydrogen water?
No.
No, really, Gary Brecka? Come on. Really?
Ugh.
Yeah.
Gary Brecka, overrated.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. And then the last one is butter in your coffee.
Oh my God. So no, sorry,
Yeah.
stupid.
Dave
Like you're
Asprey,
literally just
overrated.
adding fucking like fat calories to your coffee.
Yeah. Well,
I
listen,
don't,
so it's funny that you said that because the main perspective he or narrative he tried to put out was well, your body's burning more fat when you do that. And it's like your body's burning the exogenous fat you are feeding it with for the energy because it's all it has right now. So, yeah,
yes,
when they do the labs and they see what it's burning that. It doesn't mean it's burning body fat. But the way he spun it, which is genius on his end, it's very manipulative, but it's genius on his end, was he was like, yeah, your body, see, it's burning more fat. You're losing body fat. And the normal person who maybe doesn't have the education behind them and just kind of wants to believe in something, believes that. And it's like, oh, well, that makes so much sense. Look, the labs show it. So yeah,
yeah.
I'm glad you said overrated with that because you get some people on there that would be like, no, no, it's your body's
This is
burning more fat.
actually butter coffee. Just
That's why you're
kidding.
so animated all the time. You have so much energy from all the butter coffee you're drinking.
All the butter coffee.
Yeah. Well,
Overrated.
Brooke, thank you so much for coming on here and giving us all of this insight. The main theme, hopefully, that everyone's getting is like start now to have a much much more of a quality of life in the future for yourself, and you're not becoming dependent on people. You could get up out of your chair. You could go outside when you want to. So Brooke, this was great. Why don't you let our listeners know where they could reach out to you, where they could get your content, if they want to work with you because they love what you're saying and what you're doing, where they could actually reach out and apply for that too.
Well, thank you so much for having me today, Vinny. It's been a pleasure. And if anyone would like to follow me, you could find me on Instagram at Well Balanced with Brooke. I'd be happy to hear from you and chat with you anytime.
Okay, cool. So you hear that? You could just follow her on Instagram. You could shoot her some DMs. Definitely watch her stories because she does it pretty much on a daily basis, right? You're always on there with your
I
stories
didn't
talking. Yeah,
today, but yes, most days. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. Of course, of course. Well, Brooke, thank you again. And this episode will be out this week, so I'm excited for the listeners to listen and give us some great feedback.
Thanks, Vinny.
So, on behalf of Balanced Bodies, we just want to say thank you for joining us on this episode of the Balanced Bodies Blueprint.
We are committed to bringing valuable content. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd greatly appreciate it if you can take a moment and like it and leave a 5-star review.
On Apple, just go to the show, scroll down to the bottom and rate it there. If you're on Spotify, go to the show's page, click the 3 dots, and you can rate it there as well.
And if you believe in the power of knowledge, share this episode on your social media to try and get the information out there to as many people as possible.
And as you navigate your own path towards better health, remember that Balanced Bodies is forever in your corner. See you all next week.
The podcast content may include discussions of medical topics and health-related information. However, the information provided should not be considered exhaustive or complete, and it should not be relied upon as a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment.